Big Hey, good to see you. We're being recorded as usual. Good to see you all. Um, this is our Gompa Robsell class. I think we just passed class number 100 a week or two ago. Was that right, Doris?
This is class 105.
Oh, okay. This is class 105. Okay. We're nearing halfway through the text. And after a couple of other, it'll be some while, still be some difficult sections, but after some time, when we get into the later verses, we will be going a little more rapidly. So it's not going to be forever that we will be teaching this course. So let's begin. Good to see Snehi and Richard. Let's begin with some prayers that Louise is going to put up, even though you know them. And so there was a question I'd asked before whether taking refuge, so this one verse is taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. I'd ask whether taking refuge was considered a motivation. Certainly generating bodhicitta is sort of, due to the collections I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha. That's obviously a motivation. The only person who responded so far was Nadine. So I'll ask you to think about that some more. Sangye chodang soki chognam la, changchu badu dagni kyapsuchi, dagi chushe chunen gipe sognam ki, drola penche sangye dupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la, changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi, dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki, drola penche sangye drupa sho. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect Lama, O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay. So, hi Don. Oh, hi Karen. Snehi and Mintu are here. Paul has joined us, as has Richard. Richard, is your heating off? Or did you just shave your head?
No, I've had some dermatology surgery on my right ear. Everything is fine, but I've got a big bandage and I look like Van Gogh. So I'm wearing this.
Oh, okay. That would have been nice.
No, it's okay.
So let's begin with a little meditation to try to set our motivation. So I had mentioned before, does anyone have any thoughts about that? Is say generating bodhicitta in the sense that before you enter into an activity seems quite clear that that's a motivation because it's you're let's say you're entering into the practice of the six perfections or the entering into the practice of listening to the teachings in order to become enlightened for the sake of sentient beings. How about refuge? Anyone have an idea, have a feeling about that? Nadine had sent me some ideas about that. What do you think, Snehi? Is taking refuge a kind of motivation?
I think so, because I think it's an intention, it's a deliberate intention to say I'm taking refuge in the three jewels as opposed to I'm taking refuge in, you know, getting a great job to make me happy.
Right.
So
Or non-Buddha, or in Shiva, or you know, quote, God of the of the peoples of the book, or something like that. It delineates one from the non-Buddhists. Uh, but is that how does yeah? So something to think about. Paul, what do you think? I see you're contemplating there.
Um, I can't remember the source, but I vaguely remember someone making the analogy that generating bodhicitta is compassion for others, whereas taking refuge is compassion for oneself.
Right. But in the verse that we recite by Atisha Sangye Churang Soki Chognam La, there you're taking Mahayana refuge. So it's if it were just ordinary refuge that's common to the Mahayana, Hinayana, like I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha,
Right,
not specifically the Mahayana Sangha,
right.
would be the case. But anyway, so think about that in the coming days. We'll talk about it again. So sit comfortably if you can. Relax your body and mind. Place your attention, place your mindfulness on the breathing in front. If you watch carefully, the sort of the quality of the breathing, if you notice yourself breathing quickly and uh, needing to add some extra breath because you're getting out of breath, you can kind of correlate that with the fact that your mind has begun to wander into other thoughts. When the breathing is regular and very calm, it usually reflects the fact that you're not multitasking. Your mind is not trying to think of other things at the same time. Then having settled the mind a little, quieted the mind a bit, we'll continue with a more subtle object, the mental consciousness and its nature, to calm it even more. The purpose being, within that calm mind, devoid of disturbing thoughts, say negative thoughts, we can create a positive motivation for listening to the teachings. So bring your attention to your mental consciousness. Withdraw your attention away from your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body consciousness. It's helpful thinking, bringing the winds to the center of the heart chakra, hunkering down there. Trying to perceive the consciousness, which is clear and knowing, has the function of cognizing or knowing, has the nature of clarity in several different degrees of subtlety. Here we're talking about its conventional clear light nature, the fact that it doesn't hinder the arisal or reabsorption of events, conceptual events into the mental consciousness. Whether thoughts or memories or plans, observations about the present, whatever is present in the mind, also whether there are the presence of afflictions, all of them are transitory. But not only that, they do not stain the mind. They are not part of the nature of the mind. They arise because of causes and conditions, and they can reabsorb back into the consciousness. Their seeds may remain until we've realized emptiness, seeds of afflictions and so forth. But their frequency, the frequency within which they arise and their intensity can be subdued by this kind of meditation. See if you notice also the quality of the breathing now, watching the clarity of the mind, clear light nature of the mind. The quality of the respiration is finer, more subtle, because the object is more subtle. The mind has to concentrate more. And in doing so, it prevents other conceptual thoughts from running in the background, so to speak. Maybe computer lingo background processes or something are snuffed out. And feel some joy about this, the fact that we can recognize this quality of the mind is something that we possess, that we may not have recognized, almost like as the analogies that are mentioned in the meditation on this auspicious moment, the life of leisure and endowment, freedoms and richnesses. having recognized that, like a beggar having found in a heap of garbage a precious jewel that was always there, but never, the value of which was never recognized before. Whatever other problems are arising, physical illnesses or loss of job, or your baby left you, or whatever, worry about the environment, worry about politics. Leaving all of those thoughts aside for the time being, recognizing that we can use this life to achieve one of the two great goals of liberation or enlightenment, or at least minimally create the karmic imprints that in future lives will be so inclined to seek liberation and enlightenment by leaving strong karmic imprints. Why would we seek enlightenment? Long task, might take eons if we followed the sutra path alone. Because the Buddha advised the great value for oneself and for others. We can go beyond and complete our own aim. So the two great aims we can have, the aim for oneself or the aim for others. The aim for oneself doesn't culminate with just liberation, just with nirvana. The aim for oneself culminates with the achievement of enlightenment, when everything is experienced in total, much greater bliss than the Hinayana Arhats experience, knowing all phenomena simultaneously, both their conventional and ultimate natures. And the aim for others, again, the Hinayana aim of nirvana, culminates with a certain amount of benefit for others, in that they, if you are no longer circling within cyclic existence, there's no chance of others creating negative karma with respect to you. But in the Mahayana, the aim of achieving enlightenment, the ultimate aim of others is to present to them, to emanate the two bodies, two form bodies, Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya. Why would we be motivated to achieve this? Just for ourself alone? No, mainly out of compassion for sentient beings who are exactly the same as us, as people floundering in the ocean of cyclic existence without any guide how to escape. In the middle of this ocean, no shore quickly attainable. We are also in that situation, we recognize, and others are. We're exactly the same in wanting to be free of suffering and wanting to have happiness. And besides that, all of these beings have been kind to us numberless times. They've been depthlessly kind to us in past lives and will be again in the future. They've been our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, our lovers, our friends. Even when they've been strangers, they've been beneficial to us, helpful to us in creating the infrastructure of the world. They've paid our wages. They've given us jobs. They've built the roads, the buildings that we live in. They've been policemen and policewomen. Even when they've been enemies, they've benefited us in allowing us to practice the Dharma, practice patience, and ripening our negative karma, giving us the cooperative conditions to ripen our negative karma as a human rather than in the lower realms, which would be much longer lasting, more devastating. Thinking I must achieve enlightenment from that state alone can I benefit all of these sentient beings, pluck them out of suffering and set them up into everlasting happiness. To do that, I have to accumulate the two collections, merit and wisdom. Accumulation of merit giving rise to the form bodies, the collection of wisdom, a cooperative condition to achieve the mental body, the Dharmakaya. And in order to understand how to accumulate those two collections, we need to read the Buddha's teachings, because there are not, how to achieve those two collections is not intuitively obvious. We have to depend on the great Mahayana teachers such as Nagarjuna, Buddhapalita, and so forth, Aryadeva, but especially Chandrakirti, who commented on Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom in his Madhyamakavatara, and Lama Tsong composed the Gompa Rapsel, the Illumination of the Intention, commenting on Chandrakirti's Madhyamakavatara, so that we can understand how to accumulate these two collections. So that's the subject matter of our class. Think, oh, wow, here it is right in front of me. I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material today for the purpose of achieving enlightenment, for the purpose of accumulating the two collections in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all mother sentient beings. That's my goal today. That's my long-term goal every day when we wake up, trying to develop a motivation like that. I'm going to live today, practice today, try to transform all of the conditions today into the path in order to meditate on the two bodhicittas, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta, meaning the wisdom of emptiness. Try to understand everything that happens in that way in order to get closer to achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay, thank you very much. Good to see you all. Rachel is here, joined us. Hi, Rachel. Subhash and I think Mikhail is here somewhere, isn't he? Oh, there he is. Yeah, there he is. Paul is here. Okay, good to see you. Karen, good to see you. Everything good?
Everything's good. Just having camera problems. We'll see if it stays on, but everything's good.
You're back from Florida. So a couple of what do you call it, housekeeping things. Apparently, Sister Sheila, and probably Snehi also knows this too, that wants to have our decision on whether we'll have class on the weekend corresponding to Easter. Easter's always Sunday, right? Yeah. So that weekend, of course, that would be Saturday. Which date is that, Snehi? Do you know off the top of your head?
April 19.
April 19, Doris has. So right now the schedule goes through that. Should we skip Easter weekend? So you have, if you're having family or if you're traveling, that you have a little more freedom, or should we just cut through and have class on Saturday, the 19th? Any opinions? Sean wants to gut through. Okay, that's one on one side.
I will likely miss the previous two classes because I'm going to be in Kathmandu. So
Okay.
19th, I would like to.
Yeah, okay, so another for the 19th. Snehi, do you have a feeling one way or the other? No? Okay. Anyone have any strong feelings? Mikhail, up means have class on the 19th?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, because you don't have Thanksgiving. Is that Thanksgiving? No, what am I talking about?
But
Oh, yeah, you have Easter then.
anyway, Easter is a non-event here.
Anyone adamant that we should skip class on that day? Okay, so we'll go straight through. We're gonna gut through that. Another housekeeping issue. Sister Diana has mentioned that for people in the United States who have friends who live in Florida, there's going to be a special election on, I think, April 1st, she said. And she's going to post something in the chat in case you know anyone there, that it's possible that if the Democrats were to win the two seats that are up for election there in the special election, the Democrats could again take over the control of the House of Representatives. So she's going to put that in the chat if you know anyone in Florida or if you'd like to actively help on that. And
excuse me, Venerable, there
yes,
are also very simple things anybody living anywhere in the United States can do. I'll post something that includes that.
excellent. Thank you for that. Okay. And one other thing I mentioned on Monday, but I wanted to share with you, hopefully Doris will post right now a PDF with some quotations from the book Mind in Tibetan Buddhism by Lati Rinpoche and Elizabeth Napper, with revisions by Paul Hackett. But I've used the pagination from the book that you have, although the terminology is from Paul's revision of some of the terminology. Last class, I think it was last class, seems like forever ago, I had erroneously been saying that there were three kinds of prime cognizers. But as Paul pointed out at that point, and some of you maybe it went over your your heads what we were talking about. Someone mentioned that I didn't understand what you and Paul were talking about. The very famous quote that Paul correctly voiced from Dharmakirti's Pramanavartaka from the third chapter. I think it's the first verse, right, Paul? What does it, what literally it says what?
Because there are two types of objects of comprehension, there are two forms of valid cognition, something like that. I don't have the exact quote in front of me.
Yeah, something like that. I was saying there were three. So this PDF that Doris is putting up is try to explain from the quotations what I was getting at when I was misthinking three. What I was referring to is when inferences are divided. So when you talk about valid cognition, prime cognition, pramana, right? There are two kinds because there are two kinds of objects. There are, well, yeah. So there are objects of direct perception, and there are objects that have to be understood through inference. And so the quotations here on this PDF from those various places you can read and try to understand more, refresh your memory about it. What can I say? So among inferences, there are three kinds here. So on page 77, about a third of the way down the page there, it says, when inferences are divided, there are three. This is what I was thinking. Inferences through belief, inferences through renown, inferences through the power of the fact. But then further down on page 78, it's mentioning that there are three types of objects of comprehension: manifest objects, slightly hidden objects, and deeply hidden or very hidden objects, Shinto Kokyo. So they require three kinds of inferences. So you, or the three types of pramana. The manifest objects are known through just direct perception. You don't need inference, but you need two different kinds of inferences to realize slightly hidden phenomena, like say emptiness. You need to use inferences through the power of the fact. And for deeply hidden phenomena, you need to use inferences of belief through belief. So anyway, that page may illuminate a little bit and refresh your memory for those of you who studied it before, and those who have not studied it before, maybe I'll give you a refresher. Okay, so before we start, Mintu and Sean both have questions. Mintu, what are you thinking? Oh, the Amitabha mandala there. Okay, good.
Yeah, trying to keep myself healthy, with Buddha, I hope. I have a question. So, whenever, I was been thinking about the kind of meditation that you have been instructing us. So basically, it's like when we are shutting out our five senses, right? So when you shut out the five senses, then what remains in the container is the mental sense, thought and emotion. And then, if we actually go down deeper into the concentration, mind become more quiet, then even thought and images will disappear, because that's what they do, they dissolve. And so then I guess then whatever remain is some sort of space, of space feeling, but then there's still like the subject object differentiation. So when we go deeper into meditation, even the subject object differentiation disappear, then basically we feel that we become space. And then, when we go deeper into meditation, then even space disappear, then we feel that we are only consciousness. And then when we go deeper into meditation, even that sort of disappear. So I guess my question is that when we go down deeper and deeper and deeper into deeper level of consciousness, and we go to the deepest level of consciousness, there's nothing but consciousness. So when consciousness become aware of itself, is that the realization of emptiness, or is the realization of emptiness is something different than that?
It's something different than that.
Okay. But like, yeah,
I wouldn't agree with all of your you were saying, as though all of those things were true. So you have to use particular kind of procedures to achieve the, let's say, the form and formless absorptions, like say the absorption of infinite space and infinite consciousness and nothing at all and so forth. But those states themselves are still within cyclic existence, and those states themselves, let's say, the peak of cyclic existence, where there's neither discrimination nor non-discrimination. What that means is that there's no gross discrimination, yet still some subtle discrimination. The mind is incredibly subtle and so forth. That itself is not the realization of emptiness. You, in theory, very, very able, let's say, Hinayana practitioners and bodhisattvas could use that to meditate on emptiness, but that's such a subtle mind. Usually they don't use that mind to meditate on emptiness. They usually use slightly grosser minds. At any rate, all of those states of mind, none of them are, by their very nature, experiences of emptiness. In order to experience emptiness, which is a hidden phenomena, do you agree, Binto? Do you know what hidden phenomena means?
Yes, yes.
It doesn't present itself to direct perception without using inference, first of all. It's something that is, hidden to us, but it can be directly realized once one has proved it through inference. One has developed that valid cognition that realizes it. But that takes a particular procedure. So none of those calming states of mind that you mentioned by themselves are realizations of emptiness. There might be, even if you talk about in terms of Tantra, bringing the airs in the central channel and experiencing the clear light, the natural clear light, the mother clear light, that itself is not a realization of emptiness either. That's just an experience of void. One has to graft through that death evolution a remembering consciousness of the meaning of emptiness, so that at that point there can arise in your experience, oh, this is emptiness. But none of those states that you mentioned or others that you didn't mention in the tantric pantheon are in and of themselves experiences of emptiness. That's the short answer.
Yeah, I guess if I may, can I ask the follow-up question?
It's short, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I am thinking the nature of like hidden phenomena, right? So, in some sense, the emptiness of the somebody, let's say somebody, we have like attachment to see like this bottles, this cup, for example, have some sort of like intrinsic existence. But then, supposedly like a yogi who can enter a very high meditative state, they can see this as some sort of like vibration of molecules. So in that way, they can see the emptiness of the aggregate as like with direct perception.
No, that's not, even if they were to be able to perceive the transitory nature of the object directly, and even have some kind of perception of the vibrational, the molecules or whatever, that is not from the Madhyamaka point of view, let alone the Prasangika point of view, that is not emptiness. That's not a perception of emptiness. The perception of emptiness is the experience of, say, having recognized how you perceive that cup as being inherently existing from its own side, analyzing whether it does exist that way or not. Once you've used the Prasangika logic, let's say, that was explained in detail by the Buddha and sort of illuminated by Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and so forth. Once you've used that logic to refute that, what you're left with in your mental continuum is the experience of a non-affirming negation. The direct perception, or yeah, first of all, you'd have an intellectual understanding of it, but when you have a direct perception of that the inherent existence does not exist, that is the experience of emptiness. At that point, you're not thinking of, there's no appearance of vibrating atoms or anything like that. Say, for instance, we've gone over in great detail the last couple of classes how the Buddha, this famous experience, a famous statement, the best seeing, the supreme seeing is no seeing. That means that in that meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness, there is no seeing of vibrating atoms. There's no seeing of cup. There's no seeing of anything conventional. All that one is perceiving or, quote, seeing with one's mental consciousness is a mere vacuity, which has been induced by that logic. And so, although in that meditative equipoise, you're not thinking this is emptiness, because it has been induced by that logic, you are actually realizing emptiness. And when you arise from it, you can legitimately say, oh, I just realized emptiness. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So Sean, one last thing from you? Yeah.
So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but since if I was trying to observe uncompounded space, which isn't, you can't directly perceive it, so that means I'm inferring.
You can directly perceive it eventually through having established it through inference. You can have a direct perception of it. But at any rate, go on.
But if you're using inference, is it not already a mental consciousness?
Yeah, you're perceiving it with mental consciousness. It's not something that uncompounded space or non-compounded space. What's better? What is more correct? Non-compounded, uncompounded. Anyway, permanent space, akasha, namka, is not an object of eye consciousness.
Correct.
Something.
And so if I'm meditating on the clarity of the mind,
right?
How would you distinguish the clarity of the mind from the uncompounded space, since the uncompounded space is inferred in the mental consciousness that I'm examining? Does that make sense?
Well, there are two different things. Uncompounded space, if you were to have a direct experience of that, there would be a vacuity that is appearing to your mind, but that vacuity would have been induced by the logic that proves that space is lacking any obstructing contact. Whereas the vacuity that you perceive when you meditate on emptiness seems like the same vacuity. It's, quote, space-like, because we call that meditation on emptiness the space-like meditation on emptiness, as opposed to the illusion-like meditation on emptiness that you use when you arise from meditative equipoise, right? So that space-like meditation on emptiness is also space-like. It's a vacuity, but it has been induced by the logic that proves that phenomena are not inherently existent. So what you're experiencing.
But we were meditating, I'm not referring to emptiness at this point, because we were meditating on that clarity of the mind, were we not?
Yeah, so that also is space-like, but that has been induced by meditating on the fact that the mental consciousness is devoid of any obstruction to the arisal of or absorption of mental events back into it. So there are three different, we mentioned this once or twice before. There are three different, at least here, three different kinds of experiences that might seem very similar when you're to a practitioner who's meditating on them. So if you're meditating on uncompounded space, that experience is space-like, is a vacuity. To a certain extent, there might be some fine details different, but to a certain extent, that's the same experience, mental appearance, let's say, as meditating on the conventional clear light nature of the mind. And that's also the same appearance to the mental consciousness when you're meditating on emptiness. A mere vacuity, which is a non-affirming negation. That is to say, nothing else, there's nothing else being seen at that point. But they are different because when you arise from them, you know successively, oh, I just realized uncompounded space, or I've been meditating on the clear light nature of the mind, I just experienced that, or, oh, I just realized emptiness. You would have in post-meditation different conclusions from having those apparent similar kinds of appearances. Does that make sense to you?
I think so, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So, Shankar, do you have what you need?
You didn't want, I don't know. I mean, I had something to say about what you were saying, but I don't want this to go any longer, so it's up to you.
Okay. Let's leave it for the break time. We'll take up your question at break time because that's a time when people have some questions and debate. Okay, so we are at a point right now. We just mentioned this last time. We're going to start today on page 255 in Jimpa's text, written text. On page 144 in Venerable Jones' translation, the FPMT translation, page 140. And it is in Jimpa's text, it says, the contexts, plural, and manner in which worldly perspectives can invalidate, which is not a literal translation of the Tibetan. I'm not sure why he's saying the contexts. It says, in Tibetan, it says, Jikten Nope Musul Tembao. So the FPMT translation, I think, is a little bit better, indicating the way of harming that is harmed by the world. Okay, a little bit not really clear. So where are we anyway? We're talking about in the previous section that lasted some time. There was the topic objections to the assertion that worldly perception invalidates the refutation of arising from other. So what was that? Remember that the sort of the implication is that some people would argue that worldly perception constitutes valid perception, valid cognition, valid knowledge, as Jimpa says. If that were the case, then that would mean that the argument that from a certain worldly perspective is that oh, come on, the world sees that phenomena arise from other with their quote valid conventional knowledge. So that would seem to refute or invalidate the refutation of arising from others, because the Prasangika refutes arising from others, right? There is no arising from others. What does that mean? There's no there is no inherent arising from others. So that was the section that we just finished. And now we're starting a new one in which we say there are some situations in which worldly perspective can invalidate certain things. Okay, so let's read that on. So Jimpa's translation of the second two lines of verse 631, 631 C and D says, if everyday facts are rejected from a perspective of worldly conscious consensus, then this will be invalidated on the authority of everyday experience. That's the verse we're talking about. So does that verse make any sense to anyone just off the top? What do you think, Richard? What is this saying? If everyday facts are rejected.
I am now reading this for about the 6th or 7th time, and I have to say it makes as much sense as it does the first time.
Okay. Which probably, if when you read something for the first time, it didn't make much sense when it's sort of philosophical language. So
yeah, I don't understand it at all.
Okay, so let's see what Venerable Joan translated it as at the FPMT translation on page 140. When an object of the world is denied by means of renown itself, there is harm by the world. That seems to be literally quite different than what Chimpa's translation was. My preferred translation for this is, since the objects of the world are renowned to the world, because that first line, Chikten Dunni, Chikten Drakni Ki, ends with an instrumental particle, which can be taken since. Since the objects of the world are renowned to the world, are accepted by worldly consensus, if denied, if you were to deny them, the world will damage, and what is understood, that denial. That is to say, since the objects of the world, sort of the conventional worldly objects, horses and trees and your mug and so forth, all of those are renowned to the world. That is to say that they are accepted by worldly consensus. There are horses, there are cows. Come on, guys. If you're in the bar room arguing with someone, no one's, by worldly consensus, these things exist, like your mug of beer and so forth. So if those things were denied, the things that everyone accepts, you try to use some argument, say, oh, they don't exist because of this and that. The world will deny or will refute your denial, will harm your denial, will damage that denial. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I'm just not sure that's what it says.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what it says. I'm not sure. Who do you have on your lap there? You have
I have my brain.
Oh, you have your brain. Shanka has his brain.
Yeah, his name is Louis. So you're saying that let me see if I can. You're saying that what it is saying is that if the world, if there is if somebody says, come on, there are trees,
yeah,
forget all this other stuff, there are trees and we can see them, then that argument is somehow invalidated. I don't get it. I just don't understand it.
So start this way. Because of the fact
Mhm.
that people accept trees as existing by common consensus. We say jikten drakpa, so by worldly renown, right? So we're entering into a new topic here that we may not have heard before. So this is considered to be very, very important and subtle point about the Madhyamaka, about the Prasangika presentation of conventional reality. Conventional, ultimately phenomena don't exist inherently at all, but conventionally they still somehow exist. And here, what Chandrakirti is saying is that phenomena are, that Prasangika accepts the worldly viewpoint, the worldly consensus that horses exist, that trees exist, that mugs exist, that people exist, and all of this that are accepted by renown. So, because let me read again how my preferred translation. So the Tibetan says, "Jikten doni, jikten drakni ki." So in Tibetan, that final gi, I think Tupten Jinpa has, in my opinion, has misconstrued this unless you change the order of the words in Tupten Jinpa's translation. Since the objects of the world are renowned to the world, that means by renowned to the world, that they're accepted by worldly consensus. That's the first line. Because of that, since that, if they are denied, that is, you try to use some other kind of logic to deny them, to deny that horses exist and mugs exist and everything, if denied, the worldly consensus will damage that so-called denial.
Okay, I think I understand it now. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go through this again. So I think of the various translations of this verse, one that gets the same kind of idea is in the Emptiness of Emptiness by Huntington. What was Huntington's first name? Do you know, John or Paul?
I think it was Christopher or some. Is that right? Anyway.
Christopher Hunter. Anyway, he wrote a book called Emptiness of Emptiness. Actually, he studied with the Geshe who used to be the Geshe at Manjushri Institute in London, wasn't it? Paul, do you remember? When he was in Sarnath, when
Geshe
no,
not Geshe Tekchok.
no, it was I can't remember.
The one who shall not be named.
No.
Oh no, okay.
Manjushri London used to be the Geshe there. Anyway, so he had a very good teacher, and they went over Gompa Ropsel, and he wrote he gave his own translation of the Karikas with notes in it drawn from Gompa Ropsel. So his translation of this verse was, and it's much wordier, right? He says, however, the objects encountered in everyday experience are taken for granted on the consensus of that experience. That's kind of like the first line, right? And any attempt to negate them may be effectively countered by relying on the testimony of just that everyday experience. Very similar to how I was giving that first translation. Does that make sense?
That's the clearest for me.
Is this not the same, George, as when like the person is meditating on emptiness, they come to the teacher and they're like, I don't exist. And the teacher's like, well, who's telling me you don't exist?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or,
So If someone's saying, I don't exist, well, those examples are coming up in the next couple of paragraphs here. The teacher would say, come on, yeah. Or they'll stick a pin in your arm or slap you in the face or something Zen-like, and say, yeah, who's experiencing this if you don't exist?
Or somebody's just stolen your car and you approach them and they say, but your car doesn't exist.
That's the exact example that's going to be given. Yeah, someone stole my thing. Okay, that's coming. So, Mikhail, what do you think?
Just to be sure that so the second line is saying that the world would harm that refutation.
Yeah,
Okay.
would harm that denial. So Thupten Jinpa's translation says, how does it say? If everyday facts are rejected from a perspective of worldly consensus, that's not correct. His translation, if everyday facts are rejected from a perspective of worldly consensus, then this will be invalidated on the authority of everyday experience. Paul, do you agree? Do you see that Jimpa's translation?
Yeah, I have difficulty seeing. I mean, I can see how you might read the Tibetan that way, but that doesn't sound right to me.
So if you reordered it and said, if everyday facts from a perspective of worldly consensus are rejected,
yes, that's what
the
I was
second
saying.
line.
Yes, yeah, and are rejected is actually in the second line. In his first line, he's got, if everyday facts are rejected from a perspective of worldly consensus. It just as Shankar is suggesting, as I'd mentioned before, if you change the word order, if everyday facts you might say, are accepted from a perspective of worldly consensus, then if they are rejected, this rejection will be invalidated on the authority of everyday experience. Snehi, what do you think? Making sense?
So in my mind, I'm just thinking of it this way. Like I say, Sean, I have a red pen. And Sean says, no, you don't have a red pen. That's not red. But then hopefully the rest of you will say, no, that's not right. She does have a red pen.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. And so it's not just like voting, like the consensus, like everyone says that's a red pen except for Sean.
Because I thought this is what they're trying to get at, is that we rely on convention to agree on things. So if we all agree that this is a red color, but then Sean for some reason says, no, this is not a red color, then everybody else, has to agree that, yes, this is a red color, or no, Sneh, you're wrong. This is not red. You think it's red, but you actually have a black pen.
Yeah. So a little bit different than that, but that's getting in the general idea. So previously we were saying that the world, or let's say worldly consensus, cannot invalidate the perception of emptiness. That was the last section. Cannot invalidate the Prasangika's, so Prasangika says that phenomena do not inherently arise from other. And so the worldly consensus might say, oh, yes, they can arise from other, but the worldly consensus doesn't have any authority in the realm of ultimate nature. We'd already talked about that. But now we're talking about the realm of conventional nature. In the realm of conventional nature, worldly consensus does have authority. Horses exist, mugs exist, fences exist, persons exist, and so forth. What's meant by worldly consensus here doesn't mean taking a vote. So let's read a little bit more here. So in Huntington's translation in Emptiness of Emptiness, so some of you may have that book. It's not bad. He has note 50. He says, Chandrakirti is concerned here. Note 50 is on this verse. Chandrakirti is concerned here with what Tsong Khapa has called, quote, the most profound and subtle matter within the Madhyamika system. The most profound and subtle matter within the Madhyamika system. So what is that? The concept of causal efficiency as the sole criterion for conventional validity. Essentially, the point here is that this is using Huntington's philosophical language again. Essentially, the point here is that soteriological and conventional truths do not interfere with each other because they are set in a hierarchical structure as opposed to a mutually exclusive relationship. Okay, I won't read it anymore, but what he's saying is what we already have heard, like say in Lama Chopa, one of the verses talking about, the last verse is talking about emptiness, when it says, please grant me blessings to understand Nagarjuna's ultimate intent, that there's not, although there is not even an atom of inherent existence, cause and effect is infallible, and the two are not only are they not in contradiction, they mutually affirm one another. Does that sound familiar? Stephen, does that sound familiar?
Yeah, because in the prior section, we talked about mutual dependence. That was just around the note that pointed to page 350. Is that what you mean?
I think that might be, so this, what Huntington is translated as the most profound and subtle matter within the Madhyamika system, that quotation comes in Gompa Robsell in Anne Klein's book that we used previously. Remember on the beginning of the 6th chapter? That quotation is, the feasibility of an object's respective functionality within the context of being posited by conceptuality is an uncommon mode of commentary by Buddhapalita, Shantideva, and the master Chandrakirti from among the commentators of the world, of the words and meaning of the works of the two, the father superior Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Nagarjuna. Then just after that it says, just this is also the final difficult point in the view of the Madhyamika school. So we had talked about this earlier. So this difficult point that phenomena exist conventionally, they function. The fact that they can function and everything is unambiguous, that's accepted, yet they are ultimately empty of inherent existence. These two facts seem to be contradictory to one another. Lama Yeshe used to put it this way, saying that when you study about karma, for instance, the law of cause and effect, you develop a certain kind of confidence in that, clarity in that. Oh yeah, if you create a negative action, you're going to have a suffering result, and so forth and so on. If you create virtuous actions, you're going to have pleasant results in the future, and so forth. At that point, if you were to think about the phenomena that that all of these things are empty, that would seem to contradict that. If they're empty, how could they function? How could you have a karmic result from something if the causes and the results are both empty? Whereas when you're meditating on emptiness, you might develop some confidence that everything is empty of inherent existence, in which case you might not think that phenomena have a chance of being causally related with one another. So the fact that these two spheres are complementary, in no way contradictory to one another, is this, what did we say? Just this is also the final difficult point in the view of the Madhyamika school. So if you want to see in Anne Klein's book, if you still have that PDF or the actual book, it's on page 178. And also in Gompa Rapsal itself, which we were countering, you can find that in that section also. Okay. So if you took the first line in Jimpa, say, if everyday facts from the perspective of worldly consensus are rejected, then this rejection will be invalidated on the authority of everyday experience. If you change the words of that first line, I think that accords with these other translations and understandings. John, does that make sense to you? You following?
Yes,
Okay.
it does make sense to me.
Okay. So let's read now Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on that verse, right? So in Jimpa's translation, it says, in that case, so where does that, in that case, where does that come up? In that case, one might ask, what is the manner in which the worldly perspective might invalidate? Or is Venerable Joe's translation saying, well then, how is there harm by the world? So in other words, earlier in the last section, we said worldly consensus or the world cannot harm the sphere of understanding emptiness because it's beyond the realm of worldly consensus. Worldly consensus only deals with the conventional reality. We already finished that section. Now we're on this section. So in that case, in other words, I think Jimpa is trying to draw this out. In the case that worldly consensus or the world cannot invalidate or harm the ultimate, what can it harm? What can worldly consensus harm? What can it invalidate? So he says, in that case, one might ask, what is the manner in which the worldly perspective might invalidate? Following? Making sense? Don, what do you think?
Yes, I'm still struggling a little.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm struggling too.
It seems that we've gone from disputing things existing, and I thought we were originally disputing how they arose.
Right. So the whole question revolves around whether phenomena are generated or arise from self, from other, from both self and other, or causelessly. Nagarjuna said they don't arise from any of those four positions. So if that would seem to say that phenomena do not arise at all. What it means is that they do not arise inherently, right? So later, a little bit later, we will come to the section that says they do. There is a kind of arisal that arises from other, but not inherently other. a conventionally existent or imputedly existent seed gives rise to an imputedly existent sprout. That is accepted by Prasangika, but not just the terminology that the sprout arises from the seed, which is other than it, right? The seed and the sprout are other. They're not the same thing. We already refuted that they could be the same thing. So in this refutation of Nagarjuna, what we're refuting is that an inherently existent seed, or say an inherently existent sprout, can arise from an inherently existent seed. It doesn't arise from something that's inherently other. So here, let's go back to this case. In that case, one might ask, what is the manner in which the worldly perspective could invalidate anything? It can't invalidate the sphere of ultimate existence. Then he continues, now, if everyday facts acknowledged and established by the world are rejected from the perspective of worldly consensus, then the standpoint of this person will be invalidated on the authority of everyday experience. So that commentary seems to fly in the face of Tupajimba's translation of the root verse. So this seems to be correct, his translation there. Venerable Joan translates that section. She said, then, how is there harm by the world? So what's the sphere in which worldly consensus can harm some other kind of perception? It can't harm the perception of the Aryas, because it's not the sphere of ordinary worldly consciousness to understand emptiness. The Aryas, say, reign supreme in the realm of ultimate analysis. So how is it? Is there some realm in which there is harm by the world? So the response, she said, when an object that is renowned to and established for the world is itself denied by means of is denied. And I think she's got it wrong here also, is denied by means of the renown of the world as self-knoweth, is denied. There is harm of the world to that person by means of the renown of the world itself. So again, I think both of these translations are missing the point here. Jimpa's translation here of this commentary, I think, is correct. Now, if everyday facts acknowledged and established by the world, by worldly consensus, they are acknowledged and established by the world. If those things are rejected from the established by the world, are rejected, again, right? It has to be a comma there or something. From this perspective of worldly consensus, if those things are rejected, yeah, I think both of them are missing the point. If you look at the Tibetan and the Sanskrit, it seems clear that the meaning is what we were talking about before. So it's talking about if everyday facts that are acknowledged and established by the world, if they are rejected, then from this perspective of the worldly consensus, that person will be invalidated. That position will be invalidated on the authority of everyday experience. So I'm really sorry that both translations here, I feel, are missing the point, and so that makes the explanation almost you have to keep it in your mind, so to speak. Louise, what do you think?
I'm wondering, is this a good time to take a break?
Let's just finish this a little bit further. Yeah, that will be a good time. How are we doing in terms of understanding this? Mikhail, what do you think? Is it making sense?
Yeah, your explanation makes sense. Otherwise, I couldn't really understand that bit. I think it makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go a little bit further then. The next paragraph says, now this becomes more clear, and in terms of John's example about someone stealing your car or someone, Lama Khapa, the translation by Jimba says, say a person states that someone stole a substance of mind. As Geshe Zopa said, someone stole my thing. Another person asks him, what kind of substance? Or in other words, what thing did they steal? Someone stole my thing, my stuff. Well, what stuff did they steal? What kind of stuff? What kind of zay? What kind of substance? And then that person says, they stole my vase. They stole a vase. Okay. So someone says, someone stole my things. Someone stole a thing of mine. Another person says, what thing was that? Someone says, that thing was a vase. Now, if in response, the person you're talking to retorts, a vase is not a substance because it is a cognizable object like the vase in a dream. Stephen's got a good gut chuckle from that. What do you think, Stephen?
I found John's example really helpful, and I was just thinking about what kind of reaction a person would get when they told them that your stolen car was actually totally non-existent.
Right. Or your vase is not a substance, it's not a thing. You know, someone stole my thing, someone stole my stuff, someone stole my thing. But a vase is not a thing, it's not a substance, because it is a cognizable object like the vase in a dream. That's that end quote. It is the content of this kind of refutation that is undermined by the perspectives of the world. So first of all, what kind of refutation is that? Of who would say, John or Paul, let's say, who would say that a vase is not a substance because it is a cognizable object like the vase in a dream?
It actually reminds me of a conversation I had in graduate school. When I got to Columbia, I was staying at Union Theological Seminary, where most of the students there are in the ministry program, and you have to do time on a suicide hotline. And he said that you have to sit there and take these calls. He said that, you know, someone might call and say, I'm standing on the roof of my building and I'm thinking of jumping. And I said, see, I would be very bad at this because I would try to convince them the building didn't exist.
You were on the hotline.
I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. I would be bad at that job, was my point, was like, because I would try to convince them that the building didn't exist.
Yeah, you would be like this person.
I would be like the jerk who says, but your vase doesn't exist. Why are you getting upset?
Yeah. So here it says, in de bumpa shende bumpa ni ze mayinte shelja yimpe chir milam gi bumpa shino. That's this statement. The vase is not a substance. Where did I get here? Bumpa ni ze mayente. A vase is not a substance. It's not a, in the common terminology, it's not a thing. It's not stuff, because it is an object of comprehension. Shelja yimpe chir.
No pervasion.
Who says that? Who would even offer that as an argument?
A nihilist, maybe?
Chittamatra?
Well,
Maybe.
well, someone who has misunderstood the meaning of.
Is that a Prasangika or a Madhyamaka logical argument? A vase is not a substance because it is an object of comprehension. Object of comprehension is a synonym of object of knowledge, is it not? For Prasangika? So that's saying a vase is not a subject, is not a substance because it is an object of knowledge. Prasangika would never say that. So just stating this right here out of context, that could cause some confusion. You might think, is that an illogical statement? A vase is not a substance because it is an object of comprehension? What do you think, Suvansh? Do you make it making sense?
Well, yeah, I'm good with what is over here. Venerable George, all of this reminds me that there has to be a veneer between the two truths.
Okay, some demarcation.
Yeah, some, right? You can't, and this is what what I've been exposed to, is that you can't be talking about both of them. You can't intermingle the two of them. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So
Right.
that's why, in a way, you have to keep them separate.
Yeah, Nagarjuna said that all phenomena are encompassed in the two truths. Any phenomena has to be either a conventional truth or an ultimate truth. It cannot be both. A vase is a conventional truth. The emptiness of the vase is an ultimate truth. Okay, so that fits with that. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that this statement it's not explained right here why this other person would be saying a vase is not a substance because it is a cognizable object like the vase in a dream. I think Shanka is correct in saying that this seems like a Chittamatra argument. So someone else, you've met a Chittamatra, or Paul when he was on the fearing to be on the suicide line, saying that the building doesn't exist. You would think that in this context they would have used an example. Chandrakirti would have used an example, because Lama Tsongkhapa is paraphrasing Chandrakirti here. Would have used an example from the Madhyamaka, or particularly the Prasangika. So just let's finish that. It is the content of this kind of refutation, that someone says the vase is not a substance because it's a cognizable object. Or let's say the vase does not exist because it's not inherently existent. You could use either. It is the content of this kind of refutation that is undermined by the perspectives of the world. So the perspective of the world, worldly consensus, undermines or refutes this harm that someone is trying to say, that the vase doesn't exist at all. Okay. One second. Hold on, Shanka. Let me just read it a little bit further. I'll just finish this paragraph and then we'll take a break. In contrast, when it comes to the presentation of suchness, when it comes to the presentation of ultimate truth, which is done on the basis of taking one who is learned in ultimate truth as authoritative, taking into account the Arya's perspective on ultimate truth. In such a context, there can be no invalidation stemming from the perspective of the everyday world. It's the same as I was saying it before. So in the perspective of suchness, which we covered in the earlier section, there can be no invalidation stemming from the perspective of the everyday world, because the everyday world doesn't have authority, is not valid with respect to emptiness. But it is valid, and it can invalidate, spurious invalidations of worldly things, in that context. How are we doing? Making sense? Okay, before we break, Shanka, what do you think?
Oh, I was just going to say that, this thing about vase is not a substance because a cognizable object. I mean, I guess Chandrakirti might have put this in there also because there were other traditions, whether Hindu or other Buddhist traditions, saying you Madhyamikas are not, are nihilists basically because you don't believe anything exists because nothing inherently exists, right? So it might be kind of like a counter argument to that argument.
Yeah, so a vase is not a substance because it is a cognizable object. I'm not quite sure if that's meant to be someone's position. That's certainly not the Madhyamaka position. Might be, one might say from some point of view, it's some other tradition like that. Okay, so let's take a little break to begin the. Okay, there we go. We're back. Was it Johnny Carson or who was it? I'm back. Oh no, but that was Arnold Schwarzenegger, I guess, in Terminator. I'm back. Okay, so we're making sense. So I've found some problem with both Venerable Jones and Thupten Jinpa's translation of that verse 631, C and D, the last two lines of 631. So we're talking about this, the manner in which worldly perspectives can act to invalidate something. So it has its own sphere of authority. It can invalidate statements that, say my car was stolen, and then someone says, "Oh, your car does not was not stolen because your car does not exist because it does not inherently exist." It does exist, but to say that it doesn't exist because it doesn't inherently exist is beyond is not valid in the conventional sphere.
I think
Okay.
my homeowner's insurance tried to do that to me recently.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, actually, a tree fell on this outhouse and they wouldn't cover it because they said that it damaged the foundation. The foundation needed to be rebuilt, but they said that wasn't covered because the tree didn't damage the foundation.
Okay, there you go.
Because it didn't exist.
You should try to bring up these subjects with them. Okay, let's continue now. So in Thupten Jinpa's translation, from where we just ended, it continues. The commentary states, and that means the commentary here always means, in this context, this means Chandrakirti's auto-commentary to his root verses, right? So the Bhasham. The commentary states that, quote, the learned ones, pundits, should analyze other similar questions on that basis as well. This demonstrates how refutations like the following, which some today consider to be exemplars of great Madhyamika reasoning, are open to invalidation from the perspective of the world. These include such refutations as I am not the owner of the vase. Or Devadatta is not the one who stole it. Because Devadatta and I lack intrinsic existence. Similarly, when someone says, it grew at my farm, and someone else asks, what was grown at your farm? To which the person says, a sprout. Say then that the other person counters, a sprout is devoid of arising because it is a cognizable object, just like a dream person or a dream sprout. Okay, so what is this section talking about here, this last paragraph? The relevant quotation here from the commentary, from the auto commentary is, the learned ones should analyze other similar questions on that basis as well. Or in Venerable Jones' translation, she says, the passage from Chandrakirti's auto commentary, she has in brackets, says, the learned should also analyze others by means of this position. And then she has in brackets again, that means as follows. When someone says, I am not the owner of the pot, the vase, and Devadatta is not the robber, and when someone says, it is produced in my field, and in response to the question, what is produced, someone says a sprout, those who assert statements such as a sprout is not produced because it is an object of comprehension, and statements like a person and a sprout in a dream, when some people assert those to be the great reasonings of the middle way, are shown to be harmed by the world. So that means that a sprout does exist. You were the owner of the pot or the vase, and Devadatta was indeed, the robber, and so forth and so on. Making sense?
So, Venerable George, would this seem to imply that the person who's making these statements is someone who has misunderstood Madhyamaka?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the point. That the ultimate analysis can't invalidate the conventional, the worldly consensus. So this particular point about worldly consensus is very subtle. So it's not saying that worldly consensus, that the Prasangika accepts worldly consensus in all situations. Worldly consensus, or the view of ordinary people on the farm, in the bar, on the street, at the football stadium, or in the United States Congress or the White House, ordinary consensus does not invalidate and has no authority on the realm of ultimate truth, but it does have some authority on the level of conventional truth. There you have to figure out whether the assertions that are made by the consensus of a certain group of people, let's say a certain political party, whether those assertions actually are valid or not conventionally. That's another story. Okay, let's continue on. How are we doing? Snehi, you feel comfortable? Not so comfortable? I wish I could give you a cough drop or something. Okay, how are we doing? Rachel, what do you think? You okay? Can we go on, or Minto thinks we need to address some question here. Minto, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess my question is that, sometimes when I'm thinking about trying to hold these things in my head, it feels like this Buddhist has some sort of like personality disorder, you know. So on one hand, you know, you're thinking, oh, I'm in this deep meditation, it's profound, you know. There's no car, I see it with my eyes. There's no car, everything disappear. Then when you get out of it, it's like, oh, there's a car, and then I have to deal with this car and have to deal with mortgage and car insurance payment. And so I feel that, you know, it's almost like having some sort of split personality disorder. I'm just kind of wondering, like, how.
Medical poise, you don't see with your eyes there's no car. That's what you said. You see with your eyes there's no car. You don't see with your eye. You see with you think with your mind there is no car. Anyway, okay, good point. Yeah, we're very schizophrenic.
Yeah, so like, how do we both, I guess, how do we people deal with this sort of worldview, you know? I mean, if you don't
Yeah, that's what we just this quotation from Lama Tsongkhapa, that this is one of the subtlemost points of the Majjhimika, how these two realms can be, these two statements can be true at the same time. The phenomena are empty of inherent existence, yet they still function. That to get the fact that they're not only not contradictory, they actually help one another. That's said to be the one of the very subtle accomplishments of the correct view. When you have the correct view, like in the three principles of the path, I don't know, John and Paul may have read, or Mikhail, have you read the three principles of the path?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's one of the verses that says that when one sees that these two factors are not contradictory, but actually help one another, one has reached the actual correct view, something like that. Okay, so let's let that marinate a bit in your mind. Can I use that terminology? Let it sort of sit there and, you know, in the background, and for you to be thinking about it. So this is an important thing about the consensus of the world. Later in the text, Chandrakirti says, I do not argue with the world. When the world says horses exist and things like this, I don't argue with them. You'll see the very famous quotation later. Okay, so now the next section, using Thupten Jinpa's translation, repelling objections from the worldly perspective on the basis that arising from other does not exist even in worldly convention. Does that make sense? Or Venerable Jones says, dispelling harm from the world through protection from other, not existing even in the conventions of the world. Neither of them roll off the tongue immediately as what the meaning is. So let's see here. So first of all, this is just to get some perspective here. It just gives the name of this section, right? In the Tibetan, do you know what it says in the Tibetan? Were you following, Paul or John? What is it? It says Nipani. So suddenly it's saying the second. So how these Tibetan outlines work is that you have to go back to find out where, in what context this is the second outline of something. So Geshe Zopa liked to explain this. So in explaining the topic of the two truths, there were two sections. Or there are two sections to rebutting objections to the refutation from the worldly perspective. This has two parts. Repelling objections from the worldly perspective, assuming arising from others is accepted in worldly convention, and repelling objections from the worldly perspective on the basis that arising from others does not exist even in worldly convention. So this is talking about that outline. Let me see, did I have a page number there? It doesn't have. Okay, earlier we had, okay, no, I won't go into that. This is more detailed than we need. So this is the second outline of something that was begun some time ago. So let's read what Lama Tsong Khapa says in Thupten Jinpa's translation. So far, we have rejected there being any problem refuting arising from other from the perspective of the world, even if one were to allow for the sake of argument arising from other from the standpoint of worldly convention. We will now explain how, given that arising from other does not exist even within the perceptions of the world, there can be no invalidation coming from the world, even for someone who wishes to negate arising from other while remaining within the worldly view. Whoa. Nadine, what do you think? How are you doing? You following?
Thank you. Yes, I try to follow, but the last words I didn't understand.
Yeah. Right. So let's see how Venerable Joan translates this. So this is a prelude to verse 632. So we just finished verse 631, just most recently, the last two lines of it, C and D, that I said I thought Thupten Jinpa's translation had transposed some of the words so that it didn't make sense. So we're talking about the next verse now. This is prelude to that. So Venerable Joan says in her translation in the prelude, therefore, even though by asserting production from other in the perspective of what is renowned to the world, harm from the world was abandoned. Now, since production from other does not exist even for a seer of the world, in order to indicate, quote, there is no harm from the world, unquote, even from the point of view of those abiding in the view of the world, to the assertion that production from other is refuted, there is the following explanation. Okay, so, what are they talking about? It sounds like I'm on a different channel, or what's happened. So let's put it in some different perspective here. So the first line in Jinpa's translation, so far we have rejected there being any problem. Again, this is getting into double and triple negatives here. So far we have rejected there being any problem refuting arising from other from the perspective of the world. What does that mean? Mikhail?
I think it is saying that intrinsic production from other is not refuted by in the perspective of the world. Or is it?
So when it says refuting arising from other, that's referring to, I believe what you're saying is correct. That's referring to the Prasangika refutation, Nagarjuna's refutation of arising from other. So Nagarjuna refutes arising from other, right? So it's so knowing that fact, so far we have rejected there being any problem refuting arising from other from the perspective of the world. again,
There is no intrinsic production from other in the convention, even on the conventional level.
no, it says so far. So we haven't gotten to that point that you're talking about yet. That's coming next. So this is talking about something that we've already done. So far we have rejected, let's see, the Tibetan says detar, like that, or Joan says therefore. Jimpa says but so far, or like that. Jikten Ngor, in the perspective of the renown of the world, the consensus of the world, Shenke Kelene Kyang, even though we have refuted
Long is asserted.
Shenke Kelang Kang, even having accepted production from others in the perspective of the renown of the world, Jiktengi Nopa Pangte, refuting, or let's say refuting, abandoning harm of the world. Dani, then it says now, so it's going to be talking about something else. So what is this talking about? So far, we have rejected there being any problem refuting arising from the perspective of the world.
Is it
to allow for the sake of argument arising from other from the standpoint of worldly convention? Who's going to say, John? Yeah.
I think it's a torturous way of saying, well, the Madhyamaka has successfully established that there is no arising from other.
Yeah.
Because, from the point of view of an intrinsically existent thing or intrinsically arising from other. We've established that. And then he's going to go on to say that even if you're not a Madhyamaka, even conventional people don't buy it. They think they do, but they don't.
Right. So yeah, very important. So I think we could summarize the first part if I'm understanding what you said as in accordance with that the worldly perspective has no jurisdiction on the ultimate realm. It doesn't. It can't refute. It can't offer any problem to the Prasangika refutation of production from other. Production from other is accepted, and the worldly perspective can't harm that. That's more or less the first part, okay? So now, Jimpa's translation says, we will now explain, the Tibetan says, Dani, now, we will now explain how, given that arising from other does not exist even within the perceptions of the world, because of that, let's say, we will explain that now, how that production from other is not even accepted in the perspective of the world. You might think that that was the presupposition earlier in the arguments against the Prasangika, that, everyone says, everyone knows things arise from other. The sprout arises from the seed. But here we'll explain that how in the worldly perspective, to worldly consensus, there's no such thing as production from other. You might say, hold on, why not? That's going to be a crucial point. So that break up the sentence that way. We will now explain how, given that arising from other does not exist even within the perceptions of the world, therefore, there can be no invalidation coming from the world, even for someone who wishes to negate arising from other while remaining within the worldly view. Okay, again, a bit torturous in the English translation.
Isn't it that we should bracket every time it is written arising from other or production from other, we should bracket in intrinsic, inherent production.
In general, right? But
I mean, at least in this paragraph.
Right, I think that's right. So let's read the Jim's translation of this root verse. This is 632. In everyday experience, or you can say by worldly consensus, in everyday parlance, a man who simply left the seed, in other words, inseminated his partner, I don't want to say his wife, or a man who simply left the seed claims, I fathered this son. So what is that? Actually, the Tibetan doesn't say I fathered, the Tibetan just says I produced this son. Like say, you're standing with some other people in the maternity ward, the big glass walls, all the babies are on the other side. Your wife has just given birth to the baby. And then you probably say, I fathered that son. I produced that son, right? Does that sound like something you might have heard? Okay.
No, but that's
okay. In everyday experience, a man who simply left the seed claims, I fathered this son, or thinks, I planted this tree. So, you come onto some land, someone the previous year had planted a seed or planted a sprout, and the next year it's quite big. These evergreen trees, certain kinds of ones, they grow a lot in one year. You come back a year later and said, I planted this tree. You didn't plant the tree. You planted either the seed or you planted just a little sprout of it, but now when it's big, you say, I planted this tree. In everyday experience, those are those statements that are said. So arising from other does not exist even from the perspective of the everyday world. Why not? Because there's not a sense of the thing arising from its seed. You sort of skip that that step in your kind of worldly consensus. So that's the root verse. Let's see what Lama Tsongkhapa, or let's see, read Venerable Jones' translation of that verse. Because of that, since worldly beings, having planted a mere seed, say, I produced that boy, and conceive, I also planted that tree. Because of that, production from other does not exist even for the world. So what does Lama Tsongkhapa say here? Let's just finish this. I'll read through this once, and a little bit of commentary, and then we'll continue next time. Commentary says, why is it that in everyday experience, a man points to another person with male characteristics and claims, I fathered this son, or I produced, how did Jones say? I produced that boy, or this son. Why is it? That's a question. Though he may claim this, the Father has not extracted from his body a person with full male features and somehow implanted him in the womb of the mother. When I produced this boy, sounds like from you, the boy came directly, right? When you say, I produced this boy, or I fathered this son, almost sounds like it says, although he may claim this, the father has not extracted from his body a person with full male features and somehow implanted him into the womb of the mother. Following? What is it then? He has simply left or placed the mere seed of the son, semen in this case, an impure substance inside the mother's womb. He hasn't implanted the son there. He hasn't produced the son. He's just left his seed there. So the father, having placed the cause of the son, points to someone to be his son. This clearly proves that within the everyday experience of the world, people do not conceive the seed and the son to be intrinsically different. So the seed and the son would be the same as saying the cause and the effect, right? The seed, the semen, and the baby, the son, is the effect, right? This clearly proves that within everyday experience of the world, people do not conceive the seed and the son to be intrinsically different. Following? Suvash, what do you think? Making sense?
Yeah, I mean, those two statements, they make sense. I mean, they are quite common.
Right. See, I planted this tree. I fathered this son, proud on the football field in high school. So, that's my son. I fathered that son, something like that. He just scored the goal, right? So continuing. So even from the perspective of the everyday world, grasping at the impure seed and the son, as well as the barley seed and its sprout, as arising from other, does not exist. From the perspective of the world, there's no sense that what does it say? That the barley sprout arose from the barley seed. There's a sense that I planted that seed. I produced that barley, as though it just came from you. There's no intermediate step of cause and effect. For were these conceived conceived as different by virtue of their own essences, if the barley seed and the barley sprout were conceived as intrinsically different or different by virtue of their own essence, means the same thing. If the semen and the son were seen as intrinsically different, the father would not point to his son and claim, I produced him. You would not make that kind of statement of the world, I produced him, or I say, I planted, or I planted, I produced that tree. I grew that tree. Father would not point to his son and claim, I produced him, any more than a different person would in relation to that son. Similarly, when someone plants the mere seed of a tree and a tree grows from this, that person thinks, I planted this tree, almost as though you didn't plant the seed, you planted the tree from you, the effect came, the result came directly without the intermediate step of the cause. In relation to this example also, he has in brackets, in relation to this example too, one should reflect as above, there is no arising from other within the perspective of the everyday world, and so on. Okay, that might be a good place to stop.
So if you just said the seed produced the tree, is that
If you said
also flawed?
if you said I planted the seed,
Well, if you don't say I planted it, if you just said the seed produced the tree,
right? That could be by worldly consensus, that would be okay. I think, yeah.
is that not production from others still, or is that
From worldly consensus, yeah, from worldly consensus.
But even in worldly consensus, not all seeds go on to produce trees. There have to be other conditions. So that statement is still a conditional state. It's about conditionality, not about causation. I mean, it's distinction. It's like you know, it's one of the conditions involved, but maybe not the.
But a counter argument, isn't that the substantial? I mean, you could say, I mean, you have substantial causes and cooperative conditions. So yes, you're right. There has to be cooperative conditions, but that's still, the seed is still the substantial cause.
So what are we saying here? We're talking about whether the world, just from worldly parlance and ordinary parlance, we talk about production from others. So the last two lines in that verse is, so arising from other doesn't exist even in the perspective of everyday world. Production from others. It's sort of, the world doesn't concern itself with that intermediate step of the, you know, from you planting the seed giving rise to the tree, you say, I planted that tree, rather than I planted that seed that gave rise to the tree.
I mean, I get that, but it sounds like Tsong Khapa is saying that this is going to refute all cases of production.
His idea. This is commenting on Chandrakirti.
Okay, well, Chandrakirti is going to say that it's refuting all cases of worldly conventions of production from other.
Is he? I don't know. This clearly,
well, yeah,
everyday experience of the world. People do not conceive the seed and the sun, the semen and the sun, the sperm and the sun to be intrinsically different.
That part's clear. It's like if I just said the seed produced if I leave me out of it and say the seed produced it, is that still a failure from the conventional production of the?
Yeah, because earlier in the first paragraph, Tsong Khapa says that there is no arising. Well, I guess the question is, are you adding inherent here? Because he says there is, even if there can be no invalidation coming from the world, even for someone who wishes to negate arising from other while remaining within the worldly view. So it seems to say that all arising from other in the worldly view should be refuted.
Okay, let's think about it. Let's just for auspiciousness, I'm going to read. Did I already read that? So even from the perspective of the everyday world, grasping at the impure seed in the sun as well as the barley seed and its sprout as arising from other doesn't exist. This is the point. In order to try to understand what's going on, it's best to try to just follow the argument first. And then once you've understood the argument, go back and see some counter arguments rather than trying to raise the counter arguments right from the beginning. So even even from the perspective of the everyday world, ordinary worldly conceptions, grasping at the impure seed, the impure sperm, and the sun, as well as this barley seed and the sprout, as arising from other, doesn't exist. That's a little bit problematic, that translation. For were these conceived as different by virtue of their own essences, by intrinsically or inherently different, the Father would not point to the Son and claim, I produced him. Any more than a different person would in relation to that Son. Similarly, when someone plants the mere seed of a tree, and a tree grows from this, the person thinks, I planted this tree. In relation to this example too, one should reflect as above, there is no arising from other within the perspectives of the everyday world and so on. Okay, so difficult. Let's leave this. We will go into this, some more detail of this on discussion group on Monday, if you can join us. And but this is what we'll, so think about this and try to figure this out. Read the succeeding, the next paragraphs, because they can shed light on this assertion. And we will talk about this in, well, this is where we'll start next class. This section.
Venerable George?
Yes.
Jeffrey Hopkins' Emptiness Yoga, chapter 11, is about this verse as well, in case anyone is interested.
Excellent. So if you have that Emptiness Yoga, I don't know if it's still in print. I think
a good question.
I have a copy of it actually, hardbound.
It's still in print.
Emptiness Yoga.
Yeah, it paperback form and a different cover and all that stuff.
So which chapter, Paul? Chapter 11?
Chapter 11, Does a Plant Grow?
Okay.
It's the title of that chapter.
So yeah, so take a look at that if you'd like. Before we end, any questions? How are we doing? Shankar, that's a question, or is that like a surfer mudra?
That's a sideways thumb sideways.
Oh, okay. So not quite sure. You have a question. Okay. So Mintu, yeah. Okay, Mintu, what do you have?
I have a slightly like maybe different sort of tangentially related question. So
Different tangentially related. Okay.
yeah, so I guess one of my question is that I sometimes talk to my friends, right? And when they are doing this sort of meditation on either the emptiness or on space, they sort of like get into this sort of like a space thing, and it's become kind of dark, and so they feel that there's like a sense of fear, like I need to find something sort of secure to hold on to, and I need to find something a little bit more solid.
Which friends are these in Vietnam or that are doing Satipatthana, or what kind of friends are these?
My just regular friends in social circle, but they doing
In Vietnam or here in the States?
here in the state.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so they doing this meditation, and they in this sort of like space, and they feel that there's like a sense of disorientation, and they want to find something solid to sort of like hang on to. Often you find some sort of like what is it called, like firmness, something secure.
Yeah. So I'll just say in regard to that, there's a very famous observation that when people meditate on selflessness, especially selflessness, let's say emptiness, but selflessness of yourself, if they are not well trained, if they don't have imprints from a lot of study this lifetime and imprints from previous lifetimes, there is a fear arising that, oh, maybe I don't exist at all. And I'm not sure if that, when you're talking about darkness coming, but anyway, that is a very famous observation. And Lama Tsongkhapa was supposedly giving a discourse on emptiness one time, and one of his primary disciples, not Khejub-je or Gyaltsab-je, one of the others, maybe Paul or John remember which disciple this was, he began to hold his donka, this thing, this outer vest. And Lama Tsongkhapa commented that, oh, so-and-so was fearing that he was trying to find some stability, fearing that he no longer existed. Do you remember this story, Paul or John or Shanka? Shanka, Ron also is nodding. You've heard this story. So leave that as it is. I just wanted to mention in the dedication prayers that we're just going to do now, the final one to all of our spiritual teachers and so forth. When you're practicing guru devotion, or you're practicing reliance upon the guru. Guru devotion maybe sounds, that's a common way of saying it, but maybe for Westerners it sounds like relying on a guru. Say, for instance, there's a famous situation when one very good disciple was making mandala offerings to his guru. And the guru called from the other room, get me a cup of tea or something like this. The disciple, instead of thinking, oh, I have to continue this practice, I'm offering mandala to the guru, but the guru is right there in the other room rather than the visualization of the guru, So he dropped the mandala immediately and sped off and got the cup of tea. So some of you may see some applicability to that. Anyway, say if you're doing a guru puja and your guru asks you to do something, interrupting your continuity of guru puja, there's no contradiction. That's the right thing. The actual practice of guru devotion in practice is getting up and doing that immediately. Okay. So Louise is going to place the prayers, the first of which you probably know by heart. And you have to go beyond that. There we go. Due to these virtues, Gewadi, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not yet arisen in my mind and the mind of others, may it arise and grow, and may that which has arisen already, may it not diminish, but increase evermore. And a prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the conquerors, the Bodhisattvas, you Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, the spiritual father and your spiritual sons, Gyaltsab-je and Khejub-je, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow upon us now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. Sort of right at the beginning, asking, requesting blessings that you have the karma to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Munis' precious and complete teachings, through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. You are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother beings, mother living beings, mother sentient beings. You suddenly departed to peace. At this, I lost hope. At that point, I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. So this is the words of truth. So by these truths, by the fact that the blessings of the triple gem are undeceiving, and that the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas exist, may by the force of those truths, may a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then finally, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging skillfully with mercy, all illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. Please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your patience. Look forward to seeing you, some of you on Monday, certainly next week. Read over this section. This is a quite important section, and as you've noticed, a lot of sort of subtlety. Take into account Paul's suggestion in Possible Emptiness Yoga by Jeffrey Hopkins, if you happen to have that text, chapter 11, and we will continue next time. See you then. Be safe. Take care.
Thank you very much for